welcome to this newest textile podcast episode. This is Nani, I am Clara, and today we're talking about Fair Isle, knitting. And how are you?
I'm fine.
I'm really happy to be here and to start talking about Fair Isle because we have quite a few projects that we can show you, both finished projects and midway finished things. So first, maybe we talk about what Fair Isle actually is. So Fair Isle is a small island which is part of the Shetland Islands, which are in the north of Scotland. Fair Isle is a stranded colorwork technique where you work with 2 colors in one row, but with a lot of colors in the whole project of yours. So the knitting needles that you used are called wires, which comes from the fact that back then you wouldn't use the normal knitting needles that you have today, but you use all kinds of materials. Knitting needles are very fine, so the ones that you use for Fair Isle are very fine. They're about 1.75 millimeters, which is, in the UK size, 16. So you really get a really dense and fine piece of fabric when you're knitting Fair Isle. So this I found really interesting.
Yeah. And also, as you said, different materials. In some areas, you would use the wires of a bicycle. So these metals.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Also in Mexico, apparently, when you were knitting, they use old.
Why not?
I think it's pretty cool, and they're really long. They just had to make the points a little less dangerous.
Yeah.
But for the rest, they are perfect knitting needles.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. Also, traditionally, you used a knitting belt. So it's a pouched knitting belt made from leather, which has holes in it. And you would normally stuck your knitting needle into this leather belt to have your knitting fixed onto your body. So I saw videos and pictures of women working on their knitwear while also doing their daily chores. Yeah. So when you were washing your dishes or just doing daily things where you had a little break in between, you would take your knitwear up and knit again. Also, it enables you to knit really fast because the less of motion you have when knitting, the faster you can actually work your knitwear. So I think the women working on the Shetland Islands or knitting on the Shetland Islands are the fastest knitters in the world, maybe. Yeah. I think there was one woman who had put up a record of knitting so many stitches in 1 minute, so it's really impressive.
Yeah.
Have you worked with a knitting belt?
No, not yet. I thought about it, but I would have to relearn knitting completely new because I'm knitting continental style and not even traditional continental style because I can't hold the yarn correctly. I don't know why, but my mother, she knits traditional continental style, but I was never able to knit like her. I always hold the yarn something differently, and that's why we can't even explain to each other how we knit some things because my yarn lays completely different on my fingers and I have to move the needle differently.
Okay.
So I don't know what I'm knitting, but I'm knitting.
Okay. So is it for knitting purl stitches or just for knit stitches?
For both. In both ways, I have somehow the yarn different because I have always to hold it with my pinky. And for example, my mother can completely hold the pinky loop. She has no tension on her pinky. And I'm using
on her forefinger.
Yeah.
Okay.
And does not work for me, and I'm working the tension with the pinky.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe we can put some footage here of you knit it this way because I've never noticed before that you knit differently.
Yeah. Okay. We can do that. It's, as I said, I don't know why it is this way. It's just this way, and I managed to knit, and also the Fair Isle knitting was quite difficult for me in the beginning. I'm now knitting with both hands or the yarn from both hands.
And with your right hand when knitting English style, how do you wrap your yarn around your finger? Do you use your pinky as well?
Yeah, threading it 3 times around the pinky, and then up and down between those, and then once again around my forefinger. So I have a really strange way to hold the tension.
Okay. Interesting.
And, in the beginning it was really difficult and was really frustrated because the usual instructions didn't work for me. Even the continental European knitting style videos didn't work. Yeah, but finally I still think it looks strange, and I think I'm knitting fairly slow, but at least I'm knitting.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how fast or how slow you are knitting.
Yeah.
As long as it's fun.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, I think.
But that's maybe also the reason why I'm one day going to try the knitting belt, because then I'm forced to learn it that way, and maybe I would be able to knit faster. But for right now, even if I wanted to get one, we would have to buy it from the UK, and that's expensive.
You could make one yourself.
I have a pattern for that, yes.
Yeah, why not?
Did you already knit with a belt?
No, never before. I'd like to try one day as well, but I've never tried yet. But me too, I'm knitting with both hands, so I'm holding one yarn in one hand and the other in the other hand. For my very first Fair Isle project that I used, I hold both yarns in my left hand, so I knit continental style, but every time I hold those both on my forefinger, and then just picked the yarn that I needed for this stitch. But my yarn would get tangled in a way, because so it didn't really work for me. It wasn't a very successful way of doing it, because then I also had to knit purl stitches.
Oh,
so then it got really complicated, and then it took ages to finish one row. So then I tried to learn knitting English style as well, so holding one strand of yarn in each hand, and it works really well for me, at least for knitting, not for purling. But for purling it does work, but it's really slow for me.
Yeah, purling is also, I'm all in on regular knitting, I'm also really slow in purling, but with 2 yarns it's half as fast maybe.
Yeah. It gets really tedious really fast when you have to purl in. I'll talk about that later, because I have one project here that involves a lot of purling. So I'll show you later. So when I did a little bit of research about Fair Isle knitting, I also read that knitting was really an activity for a group of people. So of course you did your knitting all the time, but also you knit when sitting together with other people. So this is a thing I really like. I think it's still common today to get together with your knitting. I mean, there are knitting groups in every city, I think. I haven't participated in one, but maybe one day. And the thing I also liked is that knitting in Fair Isle, or in Shetland in general, was never industrialized. So women had full control over their knitting, what they wanted to do, what they wanted to sell, and they had a little bit of independence, which I found really interesting. So now we come to our next part, which is done and delighted. So Nani, what have you done in the past couple of weeks or months?
Months, it's already months. I made this wonderful little Tam O'Shanter, which is way too small for my head. And it was a pattern from Mary Wallen, and it was basically my test if I would be able to knit a garment with Fair Isle, because I haven't knitted Fair Isle before, and I wanted to know how it works, use a pattern and not already jump directly in my big project, which I have just figured out in my mind. And I really think it's easy to knit. I just really sad that it's that small. And I have made the little swatch, but in the end it turned out completely different. I don't know what happened.
Did you misread the pattern maybe?
I don't think so. What possibly happened is that I made the swatch and washed it, and it stretched.
When washing?
Yeah, after washing it was bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have some tension issues, so when it distributes the tension evenly, it then fits better. And I calculated with this bigger swatch, and maybe that's why it is now too small. But yeah, maybe I will gift it to some child or something. But
I mean, you could also just reopen the pattern until this widest point and then reknit the rest.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But I don't have that much yarn anymore left over, so
you could use another color maybe to create some gradient effect.
Yeah, there are many possibilities to revisit this project, but for now it is finished.
What yarn did you use for this?
It's some merino. My mother dyed. I think it's a 400 ply yarn.
You mean 4-ply?
4-ply yarn. And 400 meter of 100 grams. So that's what I wanted to say.
So it's the typical yarn you use for dyeing, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not yet fingering, but you could also use it for lace making. And since the yarn was originally planned for a little crochet project where I wanted to make little sheeps to set in front of the door to stop the wind, but I never did it.
Do you have a picture of that I can show you?
I haven't made them, so I don't have
them. You still haven't made those sheep?
No, I never made them. My mother dyed the yarn for me, and it was basically in my first flat while studying, and it was really cold in there. And back then I wanted to do that, and it's already 10 years ago.
Oh no.
But at least it's now a hat. It's way too small hat.
This is the kind of mistakes you make, and it happens.
Yeah. And I learned how to knit Fair Isle. At least that.
Yeah, so it's not wasted.
No.
Not at all.
It's a beautiful little swatch, and I can use it as a berry. Maybe like this.
I mean, maybe you could, when you had your hair up in a bun, maybe you could put it on your bun. Maybe it looks good.
That's an idea.
I don't know. Maybe there's a way to... We'll see.
No, not like that. Maybe another idea. Maybe as a part of a bigger hat or something like that. Could be fun, but for now it's just finished.
Very well.
Now what did you do?
So I have finished a jumper in the end of December last year. I don't have the sweater here with me because it was a present for my mom and I forgot to take it with me. So now I'll just put some pictures and video footage here. So this was planned as a Christmas present for my mom. I had only 3 weeks to do it until Christmas. It didn't really work this way, so I finished a few days after Christmas. So it's fine, it's okay. The pattern is called Sky by Mary Wallen. It's from her North Sea collection. It's a really beautiful jumper made with a Fair Isle yoke and then a cable-like pattern in the rest of the bodice. I used this wool for it, so it's Rowan felted tweed in the colors that are also recommended in the pattern. So for this project, I really stayed true to the pattern. It was just a mindless thing. I didn't have any self-designs in it or something. So the yoke part, which is the Fair Isle part, was the most fun part, I think, for me, because it was really easy and it went in a really fluid way. But the cable pattern was a bit more tedious, I'd say. So I also don't like the pattern as much, the cable pattern as much as I used to, because it's quite busy, I think. So it's not as structured and not as defined as the Fair Isle part. So, but I really like the color combination, and all in all, I'm really happy with the jumper, and I think my mother is as well.
That's the most
Yeah.
important,
Yeah.
especially if she asked for it,
Yeah.
as you said.
As she chose the pattern herself, yeah. Yes, that is my done and delighted.
Cool. And it fits.
It fits, yes.
Better than this.
Yeah. I mean, I also made it a little bit longer than it's in the pattern because my mom prefers more things to stay more on the hip than on your waist, and it turned out quite small if I would have knit it just like in the pattern. So, yeah.
But that's the cool part with a smaller pattern. You can easily elongate it, and if you had a really long or a high
Torso?
pattern,
Okay, yeah.
then you couldn't that easily elongate it, or it would be really, really long. So maybe that's the good thing about this pattern.
Yeah. I mean, the cable pattern, as it's so busy, you would really notice if it's longer or shorter. But if you had a Fair Isle full over Fair Isle pattern, then it would be more difficult because every stripe has its own place, and most of the time the stripes on your bodice are matched to the stripes on your sleeves. So you can just put another few centimeters on your sleeves or on your bodice, because then it wouldn't match anymore. So,
yeah, that's true.
but in this case, it was fine. Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't your first project in Fair Isle?
No, it was my first. But one of the last ones that I finished. Or the last one.
The next thing we want to talk about are our books, or basically Clara's books, because I don't have any Fair Isle books. So
Not yet.
Yeah, okay. I'm collecting books right now. I'm buying more and more, but just not about the themes we are talking about yet.
So you're more about historical books or lace making books?
Yeah, lace making, and right now it's hat making.
Oh.
I'm quite curious to see what's coming.
But not knitted hats, more
it's
structured.
How it's done, and I think I want to knit a hat one day, a lace hat. But that's future music, as you would say.
Here in Germany.
Yeah. I don't know how to translate it, but in German we say it's the music of the future.
I honestly haven't said this at all, ever.
Not?
No.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you can say the German translation.
So it's called
Zukunftsmusik.
Yeah.
Zukunftsmusik.
And yeah, the Zukunftsmusik of tomorrow. So, but now we are not in the future, but we are right now, and that's why Clara will tell you about this book.
So I have this book here, which is called Knitting from Fair Isle by Matti von Trion. It's a book that my friend Jana kindly lent me. So the author is a former architect, from what I could read, who moved to Fair Isle and started her own label, her own Fair Isle label. She discovered the technique of Fair Isle and got more into it, and this book is all about knitting Fair Isle patterns. So it's about knitting gloves or shawls or jumpers. So the book is divided in 3 different parts. The first part is more about the traditional way of looking at Fair Isle designs. So the author presents really traditional designs in traditional colors, in very traditional garments. Then in the next part is more about experimenting with color and with pattern repeats, and how you use your motifs in a pattern itself. So the role that each element plays in this Fair Isle design, and that's really cool. And what I also liked is that she said that, of course, swatching is really important, but when you do a swatch, to just do something useful, you could do wrist warmers, which are basically just a square piece of knitting. So this way you still have a product in the end and haven't just done some more or less useless knitting. So this one I really liked. So one thing I also really like is that she is presenting different colorways for each design. So there's a natural colorway made of dark and lighter tones, lighter colors. Then there's the traditional way, which is mostly made of blue, yellow, white, and red or black. And then there's a more modern or a more experimental color use, so with gradients or with colors that are not that bold, which I really like, because mostly Fair is really, really bold and loud. And sometimes it's cool to have some more nuanced colorways. So I don't know if I'm in the future knitting one of these, in the near future, I mean, but it looks really cool and I really like these. Like the jumper on the picture, on the cover. I really like the red and the white and the black in this combination. Or brown, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, this is the book about knitting from Fair Isle. The next book, I don't have it with me, but I still recommend it. It's called A History of Hand Knitting from Richard Rudd. It is considered, I think, one of the best or one of the most detailed books about the history of hand knitting. So it really starts at the beginning of humankind in a way, and it stops, I think, in the 80s, because the book is from the 80s. And I really recommend getting into this one if you're really interested in the history. There's also a big section about traditional knitting styles or knitting techniques from Fair Isle, from other islands, from other places mostly in Northern Europe and England or Great Britain. So now we come to our work in progress. So Nani, what are you working on right now?
I'm still working on the temperature sweater, yeah. I just was thinking about if I had added something else to the name, but
you also talked about this one in our very first podcast episode, in episode 1. And
since then, not that much has happened, at least not that much you can see, because this is... Oh, no, like so. This is where I'm at right now, and it's still so wide. But I hope it will shrink, because the swatches all did shrink quite a bit, and it's still the hip piece, so I hope it will fit. And I had to rework some. I started way too big, so I had to rescale it. Then I realized that the pattern I had planned for the waistband or waistline wasn't visible because it was too small basically for that much color. That's why I had changed the pattern, since at this area here it starts with the...
Could you maybe first say what your concept of this sweater is?
Yeah,
for those who haven't seen the first episode.
True.
So why is it called temperature sweater?
It's called temperature sweater because I had seen some temperature blankets, which are basically blankets which are made of rows or little patches in one color per temperature on a day. So you have 365 lines or patches in one color, particularly to that day in that area, usually where the knitter or crocheter lives. And I found the idea quite cool, but I don't want to knit a blanket, basically. That's too boring in my mind. I want to wear something. So I thought I might sweater out of it. I made a pattern for it. I chose some yarns. For example, this one. This is the brightest color actually, but I needed it to make it more interesting. Otherwise it would be quite dull, I thought.
So how did you plan this project?
Absolutely quite chaotically.
Okay, nice. Tell me more about this.
I basically had the idea in mind I want to do that. I went to the yarn store. No, first I picked a picture with colors I liked and picked 10 colors.
For 10 different kinds of temperatures.
Yeah. And my boyfriend made me a table, or basically a little program that's picking the temperatures of our hometown, so Aachen, the nearest weather station we have. Pick those temperatures, calculate them in an average, and then basically putting those temperatures in a cluster so that I have evenly distributed those colors. Still, this calculation was made on the temperatures of 2021, and I'm knitting with the temperatures of 2022. So it's already quite a bit.
I'm going to control this if you really did everything.
You can do. This are the two first rows of last year were quite warm, so that's why it is orange, and it was approximately 14 degrees. So this is approximately 14 degrees. And after
Celsius.
that, Celsius. And after that it got colder again, and then it gets warmer again, and now it's getting even warmer, but I still haven't reached the 15 degrees mark.
But I would think that this is the warmest temperature. So what are you using for like 30, 35 degrees?
It's white.
Okay. But this is also quite a...
It's another white.
Right. Okay.
I'm going from green to blue to orange, yellow, and white.
Okay.
That's basically the color range. I think I have excluded the violet I had in first because I didn't find it in the store. Yeah, so after I had...
But this might look really cool to have like a white tone on the bottom and then at the top.
Yeah, that was the idea. And also the sleeves will probably have the same gradient in the other direction.
Okay.
Yeah, so I should knit on it, but I didn't for half a year or so because I had to change the pattern I made.
So you mean the pattern of your... So you have the background color which changes, and then you have your main color which is dark gray.
Yeah.
So this you also made using Illustrator, or what was it?
Yeah, I used Illustrator and made basically a rasterized background and then filled in every black dot for the black yarn or graphite yarn. And this way I built up a pattern which is inspired by, I think I said this, but it's Valenciennes lace. So I have a pattern in the background. I don't think you see it, but I will insert a picture. And then some more floral parts in the yoke area and also at the wider parts of the sleeves. And at the waist I have a waistband kind of pattern. And this was too small. So in this area I have a blue yarn in the background which is quite close to the black yarn, so you don't see the pattern basically. So I had to make it bigger in order to make it visible, and this I didn't do for half a year or so. Now I have done it, and I have knitted one row or re-knitted one row. I had to like this knit back. I had to knit this back. And yeah, now I should restart.
And what about the shape of your sweater? It's an historical inspired garment, so are you using an Edwardian shape or is it more of a basic silhouette?
No, it's the Victorian Edwardian cycling sweater.
Okay.
But with smaller sleeves. So I have taken out some volume at the sleeves because I had the problem that the sleeves drooped down that much, and I hope with less material here they won't stretch that far anymore. I
mean, this Fair Isle fabric will be quite heavy still because you're using the double amount of yarn.
Yeah, so but it's also less stretchy than the others I have already made. So now I have to get back in it, on it, with it, around it. I don't know.
All the way around.
Yeah.
What needle size are you using? What kind of wires are you using? Wood.
I think it's 3 millimeter, but I don't know. I can't read it anywhere.
It looks smaller than 3 millimeters.
Maybe it's also 2.5 millimeters. Fairly fine, but not that fine. I could knit finer, but I don't want to.
No, then it really gets really stiff, maybe.
Yeah. And it still looks so big. Like, I don't know if my hips are as wide as my shoulders.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Maybe you can
But
try.
then, if it's an Edwardian silhouette, I can really use some bump pads and nobody would notice. So it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's my work in progress, which will be a work in progress for quite a while, I guess.
But I'm really excited to see how it looks in the end, because I really like the idea. Also, I like the colors you use, because normally these temperature blankets are so bold and so it just screams in your face. And here the colors are really nuanced and they fit really lovely in a really lovely way to each other.
I hope so. I hope that in the end it still looks as I envisioned it. But yeah, it's not the easiest project to start your second Fair Isle with.
Yeah. Is it easy to get the pattern in your mind?
This part was really easy, yes.
Because you would have quite a lot of floats, big length of floats in your background.
Yeah. I'm tucking that in every second stitch, so for me that's now quite automatically. But I think now the pattern starts and it's going to be quite difficult. I have to really concentrate on it and because basically each row will be different. And this wasn't easy. Was easier in the lower part. But I don't want to make just this pattern for the whole bodice.
That would be a bit boring too.
Yeah. So maybe once it is finished in 2 or 3 years, then
you can start on the next one for year 2025 or something.
But it's the temperatures of my 30th year on Earth.
Okay.
So it has a meaning.
Yeah.
So what did you? Well, not did you? Are you doing?
I am currently working on the Ernst cardigan. So this is also a pattern from Mary Wallen from her Shetland collection, and as I said, the name of the pattern is Ernst, and Ernst is also a part of the Shetland Islands. So the islands, there are several islands, and one of them is called, the one in the north is called Ernst. So there is another knitting podcast that I watched last year, which is called Melmade. And the person in this podcast made this cardigan. And I always wanted to make a Mary Wallen cardigan or a Mary Wallen jumper, because I really liked how intricate these were and how much beautiful Fair Isle patterns were in them. So I just decided to make the Ernst cardigan as well. So this is one sleeve. You can see it here maybe. I used the original colors that are recommended in the pattern and the original yarns. These are the Jamieson's of Scotland Spindrift yarns. It uses 13 colors, so it's quite a lot. And you have a big diagram which you have to decipher first, because it was quite complicated for me to get into this, because as it's also my first Mary Wallen knit that I started, I had to get used to her style of writing and the style of pattern writing that she has, because she doesn't give that much information. It's kept in a very short and not in a detailed way. So yeah, I started with the sleeve because I thought it's a smaller part of the garment. It's maybe easier to get. Also, if I don't get the tension right, then it's less visible on the sleeve than on your bodice. So yeah, this sleeve, as you can see, is knit back and forth, which is really tedious because knitting purling Fair Isle is so tedious. Also, what I wanted to do is to weave in the yarns when knitting. So when you start your purl row, you have cut off 2 pieces of yarn. you're starting with 2 new colors of yarn, and then you have to wrap those around each stitch while purling. So the tension was all over the place, and I had to just readjust by hand by pulling on each string of yarn. So it is really tedious. I have started on the second sleeve also now. As you can see here, it's quite a bit of work left. So, but normally the pattern is designed in a way that you knit your sleeve separately, you knit your front and back bodice also separately, but I didn't want to do this for the bodice. So I started to make it as one. So my plan is to knit this in a round. I have already started for quite a big part. And then I want to try out steeking, which I also have never done before. So steeking means that you cut it off in here, and then you knit a few stitches, or you crochet a few stitches around this part to make them stiff and to make sure that they don't unravel. And then you pick up stitches along the edge and to create your cardigan button tape. So I've knit some 10 extra stitches in the front, and then I cut in the middle, so I have 5 extra stitches on each side, and then I have enough room of fabric to put on the button band. It looks quite big too, but better too big than too small, I'd say. So it will be a really fitted and relaxed piece of garment for me. I think it's okay. As long as the shoulder part will fit nicely, then the rest will be okay. But I've just arrived around this part here, so the more complicated area around here I will still have to tackle that. Yes, so the yarn is really beautiful. It has like thousands of colors in just one yarn color, and it's so beautiful to look at. And it also knits really comfortably, I'd say. It's really forgiving also. I mean, I'm not the most experienced fair knitter, not at all, but I think the tension looks quite okay, quite good, which also comes from this yarn. Yeah.
And also when you have washed it once, it will be, I'd say you won't see any difference anymore. How long has it taken so far?
I've started in November. Then in December I did a break to knit the other Mary Wallen jumper that I just showed you for my mother. And this one, okay, I did a lot of knitting in January. This one was made in the whole of January. I spent a lot of time in front of the TV doing knitting, so I didn't do anything else. So I didn't do sewing or anything. So, but as I said, this is just knitting. There are no purl stitches in this, so it's really, really comfortable to knit.
Yeah, that's true.
Also the pattern, besides from some smaller parts, the pattern is really easy to memorize. So it's mostly knit 3, knit 1, knit 3, knit 1, or knit 4, knit 2. So it's easy to memorize, but I wouldn't have that much fun if I had decided to make the front and back separately. So there's another thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to pattern designing, because you studied textile design, so maybe it's good to have a discussion here. In this pattern, normally you have one pattern repeat in one specific color, and then you knit in 2 colors for like 2 or 3 rows. Then the pattern is divided by one line in other colors, like you can see here. And then you repick the old 2 yarns and reknit in those old 2 yarns to have a symmetrical way. So this line in here, in red for example, divides the whole pattern, and as it is one line in different colors, you have to break up the yarn, knit 1 row to the other end of the knitwear, and start with your older colors. So in this way, I think it would be easier to have 2 rows in this middle color, that in the end you just end at the point where you started with this color. So you wouldn't have to break off your yarn, but just re-pick the yarn that you left on your knitting and restart in your older colors.
Yeah,
I think. So this way you wouldn't have to cut off all your ends, because it gets quite, the knitwear gets quite thick and quite bulky at the end. So I'm not sure, what do you say about this? Wouldn't it be easier to have your knitting pattern designed in a way where the knitter has less obstacles to go through when...
Yes, of course, but it is a thing about flat knitting. You only have this problem when you're flat knitting. And I'd say if you plan to make a flat knit pattern, it would be smart to design it in a way that you have the least or less need yarn break-offs as possible. So that means you have per color at least 2 rows, and it would make easier and would make less bulky at the sides. But if you are knitting it in a round, you wouldn't have that much of an issue. You only have to break off the one color you insert here, and maybe in the upper part, if I don't know, sorry,
That's good.
Can you steep that part here? No.
No, because it's not. What do you mean? You mean that I could knit the whole thing in the round, and yes, that would be possible.
Okay. So then you even hadn't. I think because up here it would be really bulky with all this yarn.
Yeah. I mean, I will cut these yarn ends off. So they're woven in, but then I will cut them off later. Yeah.
But still, I think. Well, it's still a really.
It's heavy and it's dense.
Dense knitting.
Yeah.
And I think it was done all like this all the time. Or I don't think they knitted
in a
round.
Traditional way?
Yeah.
I think, I'm not really sure, but I think most of these were knit in the round.
Really?
Because I watched a video of a woman from Fair Isle doing Fair Isle knitting, and she said that she didn't want to seam. She didn't want to do some sewing. So this is one thing, and also with this one, I really got out of the rhythm with knitting. So this one was really comfortable, even though it's just more work than anything, but you really get out of the rhythm with this one, because the knitting goes really smoothly, and then you have to cut off your yarn, put on 2 new colors, do also some purling, so it's just a lot of interruption and a lot of it's not that comfortable to knit, sadly.
So to make it easier to yourself, knit in a round.
Yeah. Maybe others have knit. I know that a lot of other Mary Wallen pieces are also knit flat. So maybe some of you haven't flat Fair Isle and have some tips or some experiences to share with this one. Because I really like the design, but it takes a lot of time, and it's not that comfortable, and not that you don't really get in the flow of knitting. Yeah,
interesting.
But I still think it's worth it in the end.
It looks beautiful. It's a really beautiful color range.
I also like this 2-colored ribbing.
Yeah.
Mary Wallen even inserted a stranded colorwork ribbing, which is really cool.
Quite a bit to go, huh?
Yeah. Yes. So the other sleeve, which is also more the tedious part, and also with this one, I will have to figure out how to go upwards, because then at some point the neckline starts, and I have to rethink the pattern, because the front and the back are written separately in the pattern. So I have to combine all of this in one piece of round knitting, and because of that I haven't done a lot of knitting in these past few weeks. Yeah, it's a bit on a break. I'm a bit on a break with this one. Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Really cool. So now you have seen our work in progress, but Clara also has something in her archive. So Let us know what is in your archive.
Okay. So one of my pieces from my archive is this jumper here. It's a lace jumper in a lace pattern and a Fair Isle yoke. So the pattern is an original 1940s pattern that I bought from Retro Claude. She also has a YouTube channel and presents a lot of vintage and historical knitting, and I really enjoy her videos. Yeah, so highly recommend. She also has quite a collection of antique and mostly vintage knitting patterns, and some of them are scanned and she sells them online, so I got this one. I used the Yarn Drops design Flora, which is, I don't remember, I think it's wool. Yes, I think it's 100% wool. It's a bit scratchy, so I don't wear it every day, but from time to time I like to wear it. When you look closely, it's made of a small cable pattern and then a lace pattern. So it's really complex, I think, for a lace pattern. I mean, no, there are more complex lace patterns out there, but I still find it really nice. And for the lace pattern, I don't know, do you knit cables? Do you use a cable needle, or because there are different ways of knitting cables. I think you can also knit without a cable needle. So just dropping the stitches, picking them up again.
I use both techniques. I once knitted a cardigan with really chunky yarn and really big cables. There I used a cable needle. But for the cycling sweater with the cables, I sometimes used a regular needle or nothing. It depended on which part of the pattern I was in. If I have many stitches to transfer, I use the needle, and if not, I don't.
Okay. So I haven't tried out the method of not using a cable needle. So what I did, I used this. This is a broken wooden needle in the same needle size that I used for my jumper. I think it broke when I started knitting this. I was really sad because I love wooden needles, but they break so easily when they're so small.
That's true.
So I used this as a cable needle because it's easy to slip the yarn onto the stitches onto this needle and pull them off again.
Yeah.
So I got quite in a flow with this one, and it was really nice. For the Fair Isle pattern, I used some scrap yarn that I had laying around, which all had around the same thickness. So it's a really nice project to just get to know Fair Isle a little bit better, because it's the end of the jumper, so after this you are basically done. And also it's not that much, so.
And you could use some scraps, so that's perfect basically.
Yeah.
And you could also, as you said, it's a little bit scratchy, you could put a white blouse or cream blouse underneath.
But this is a problem I mostly have when knitting with wool, that the jumper itself is also really warm.
Yeah,
and then when putting a shirt underneath, it's even warmer. And we don't live in an area where it's just really cold. It's not that warm in here, but it's not that cold too.
It's cold. In my world, it's cold.
But when you're going outside, then you're going into
true. It's always heated inside.
Yeah. So
you could wear it outside without a jacket.
But for this, it's too loose because it's still a lace jumper, so there's a lot of air flowing through this.
So maybe it's perfect for the spring or autumn times when it's just not cold or just not warm yet.
Yeah, I think too.
When have you finished it?
I think it was 2021. So 2 years ago. I started this 2 years ago, I think.
And you haven't checked out when to wear it yet?
I have worn it on several occasions. So it was fine, but it's scratchy around here. So maybe you've noticed me scratching myself in this podcast a bit. Yeah, that's how it works.
But you get used to it too, right?
Yes, yeah. I also heard one tip, I don't know where it's from, that in order to get your knitting less frizzy and less scratchy, you can put it in your freezer. And then it won't get that scratchy anymore. I'm not sure what scientific method lies behind this, but this is what I heard. So maybe you could try it out.
That goes contrary to what I thought it would do. But
Okay.
I don't know.
What did you think?
Because if you have the fiber of the wool, there are these little scallops, and when it's cold, they go up. So they are more...
To isolate.
Yeah, to isolate. And so if they are put in the freezer, they should go up and it would get scratchier, in my mind. But maybe it's not what happens.
I'm not sure if these scallops are what makes a jumper scratchy or if it's the small fibers itself that are sticking out. Because wool is quite lockig.
Curly?
Because wool fibers are quite curly, so I think it's more about these small fibers that are picking your skin
out. Yeah, that's possible.
I don't think that the scallops itself are scratchy.
Superwash wool, but I don't think it's superwash, right?
No, it's not superwash.
Then that's not the point.
Superwash wool really has a whole different kinds of Eigenschaften, properties.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's just so I wouldn't ever knit Fair with superwash wool.
No, don't do that.
No.
I knitted my first jumper, the violet one, with superwash wool, and it's...
But it isn't Fair.
No, and there it also is not cool. I don't like it because it gets really saggy. It hasn't the structure which wool, which is not superwashed, still has. So if normal jumper already lose that much of the shape, Fair Isle would look ugly, just ugly.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't stick to each other, which is the main purpose of superwash, that you can wash it without felting the yarn.
Yep.
But for Fair Isle, you really need your fibers to stick to each other.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my from the archives. I don't think that I have any other that I want to show, at least.
That's true. I also have some samples which are quite... Well, I used some scrapped yarns. You don't see what it should look like. So
I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
If you want to watch any of our other videos, then check out our YouTube channel. We talk a lot about lace making also, and historical costuming, historical sewing, needleworks in general, so stay tuned.
So basically every craft which is textile you can find.
There's no limit for us.
No, not yet. Time is the only limit.
That's so true, sadly. That's so true. Yes, so see you soon.
Bye.